the International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.
Bienvenidos todos,
Welcome,
bienvenidos a
everyone.
este cuarto día
Welcome to this fourth day
del Quo Vadis de la
of
International
Quo Vadis
Association of
for the
Coaching. Me
International
da muchísimo
Association of
gusto
Coaching.
que estemos en
I am
esta
very pleased
semana
that we are in
del
this week
evento anual que
of
se hace en la
the
IAC
annual
de Quo
event
Vadis
that
Coaching.
we host on IAC of
Tendremos
Quo
un
Vadis
grupo de
Coaching.
invitadas y
Today we have
también un lujo
a
de temazo para poder abordar junto a nosotros. Recuerden que
luxury
tienen su canal
topic
de
and
interpretación.
guests.
La
Remember,
elección
you
la
have your
pueden
interpretation
hacer
channel,
como
the
lo pueden
choice
ver
that
en
you can
pantalla
do.
en los tres
As you
idiomas,
can see on screen in
inclusive
the
en
three
el cuarto si hay
languages
alguna
and
persona que
even the
habla
fourth one, if
francés.
there's anyone that
Tienen la
speaks
forma de
French.
elegirlo en el icono que presenta
You
Zoom
have
abajo
how
con
to choose
la
it in
forma de
the
mundo, o
icon
también
that Zoom's
aparece en algunas computadoras
provides
con tres
at the bottom
puntitos,
as a
y ahí
world
pueden
icon. There's
elegir
also
el
some
idioma que deseen
computers with
escuchar de
three
su
dots. There you
preferencia,
can choose the
colocar clic
language
en
of your
silenciar
preference.
el audio
You can
original
click
para que
on
solamente
mute
puedan
original
escuchar a
audio
nuestros
so you can only
intérpretes.
hear
Y
our
bueno,
interpreters.
dicho esto,
And with
arrancando
that
y
said,
dando banderazo a un día
starting and giving the green flag to another day.
importante. El tema de hoy es relevante, como les decía,
So today's topic, as I was mentioning, is relevant.
en el tejido humano sobre el nuevo
So
capital
we're
del
going to
que
be talking
queremos
about the
conversar.
social fabric
Estamos
of
muy
that
seguros
new capital that we want
y
to talk about
es
today.
parte de
We're
lo que venimos a
certain,
proponerles
and it's part of
exactamente el
what
día
we
de
come
hoy,
to
de
propose to you
que
today,
existen
that
dentro de esta realidad que estamos viviendo
there's within this reality
algunas
that we're
temáticas
living
que no han
through
sido quizás abordados
some
con la
topics that perhaps
complejidad y
have
la
not
urgencia
been
que merecen.
covered with the
Tenemos
complexity and the
más
urgency that
acceso a
they
la tecnología,
demand. We
sin
have a lot
duda.
more access to technology,
Tenemos mucho
undoubtedly.
más inteligencia
We
artificial a
have a lot
nuestro
more
alrededor. Tenemos
artificial
una era
intelligence around us.
hiperconectada y sin embargo
We have
nunca
an
antes la
era that's
humanidad ha estado tan
hyper-connected, and
desconectada
however,
de los
never
otros.
before has humanity been
Usa una de
so
las frases
disconnected
de
from one
Byung-Chul
another.
Han, el filósofo contemporáneo surcoreano,
Like one of
que
the Yun
menciona
Han
que no
phrases
hemos
that mentions that
convertido en
we have
nuestros
not
propios explotadores.
we
Lo
have
cierto es que
become our
vivimos
own
una era
exploiters.
que rinde
And the
culto
truth is that we
a
live
un
in an era
rendimiento
that
excesivo, a
um,
lo extraordinario, a un
really
ser excepcional
looks for something
y a la
extraordinary, to being
optimización en todo
exceptional and
momento.
to optimizing at
Y
any given
hemos
point.
vivido desde hace mucho
And
tiempo en el
we've lived
siempre
for a
disponible,
long time now
el
of
aguantar un poco
always
más, vamos
available,
con
of
todo.
holding on a little
Casi se
bit
podría
more,
decir que hemos
and
caído en
let's
una tiranía de la
go after it.
positividad,
We've almost
y
fallen
eso
into a
enmarcado
tyranny of
dentro de un
positivity.
sistema
And
que
this
premia la
framed
vida
within a
ocupada,
system that
que
rewards
honra a
a
la
busy
persona
life,
que vive al tope
that honors the
y
person that
que
lives at
es
full,
exitosa en los pasillos de
and
las
that is
redes
successful
sociales,
in the hallways
está
of
socavando
social media.
definitivamente con
It's
nuestra libertad
definitely
física
undermining
y
our
con nuestro
freedom
bienestar. Algunas
and our
estadísticas,
well-being.
solo por
Some
mencionar algunas,
statistics,
son claves para
and just
este
to mention a few,
2025 que
are key for
recientemente
this 2025 that
amaneció saliendo.
recently
Estas
have
cifras
been
arrojan
coming out. These
contundentemente lo que
numbers
estamos hoy poniendo sobre la
indicate
mesa de conversación,
very clearly what
y
we're
el
discussing in
estrés,
our
por
table
ejemplo, en
today.
el liderazgo,
And
que es
stress, for
mayoría de
example,
nuestros
in
coaches de
leadership,
la
that
comunidad,
is most of our
dando sus
coaches in the
servicios,
community
ha
are
alcanzado niveles
providing their
críticos.
services.
Algunos
This has reached critical levels.
quiero presentarles
So
muy
I just want to
rápidamente
present to you very quickly
una de esas estadísticas,
um, one of
muy
those
rápidamente
statistics
para
that we're
pasar
mentioning
de
very
inmediato a
quickly to
presentar a
go ahead
nuestras
and move
panelistas
on to
y
our
poder
presenting
trabajar
our
un poco
panelists
con
and be able to work a little
lo que
bit
hemos
with
traído para ustedes. Una de las
what we
cosas que
brought
hemos
for you
estado
today. One
viviendo
of the
dentro
things
de
that we have
esta
been living through
normalidad
within this
tan anormal que
new
llamamos normal
normal,
es
so
que, por
abnormal leadership has achieved burnout that increased from 52% in 2023 to 56% in 2025. We could also say that 43% of companies have lost at least half of their leadership teams at intervals or permanently due to exhaustion or burnout. Third interesting point is that 74% of executives in health workers report extreme levels of stress. 73% of C-level executives are overworked, and they argue with their companies that they don't have enough rest. Just to mention one last point, Gen X and millennial leaders are experimenting the highest indexes of burnouts. And I think this is a reality. And this reality definitively confronts us with being here today, showing this amidst this tension, amidst this numbers, there's a new paradigm emerging, and here's where we are here today. Capital that's not only measured in economical terms now, but also in human flourishing terms. And this forum is an urgent calling for all the community of coaches and society itself to become aware of that change in the human condition where the era of burnout, that syndrome of busy life, in case you haven't heard it, it's a product of our times, answering to the pressures that we are imposing on ourselves and that the system imposes on us, the system that we live in. It is this chronic state of being perpetually active and in a hurry where human beings constantly feel overwhelmed, an awareness, a disconnection with being present, and very little time with everything. They're totally disconnected to their own needs, their basic needs. So as coaching professionals, we can contribute from coaching like the vital catalyzer and necessary one to transform this reality and contribute to a future that undoubtedly will be more oriented to a sustainable well-being. Today, I want to invite you not to look for comfortable answers and that we're capable of asking ourselves those uncomfortable questions. So this flourishing allows through the coaching sessions and our interventions that we provoke conversations that can redefine that capital, the most important one of our times. And for that, and without further ado, we're joined particularly with a luxury panel that's specialized in these topics that we bring for you today. We hope you truly enjoy it because we prepared it with a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and particularly with a lot of love for all of you. I want to invite Maria Siroes from the United States. Maria, welcome. And my dear Maria, it's actually an associate consultant that's integrator, a main participant knowledge has 3 years of experience, author and speaker in resiliency and positive psychology. Welcome, Maria. And please, we want to hear your greetings.
Good morning. I have more than 30 years of experience, not 3. It's wonderful to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
As a specialist in the field of resilience, it has become clear to me that we lose an opportunity.
I'm sorry, Maria.
With our coaches.
I'm sorry. Disculpame.
Just a second, Maria. Apologies. I just wanted to introduce the rest of our colleagues, and then we'll start with you right away. Thank you. And up next, I want to call Michelle Ferrari from Mexico, CEO and founder, a strategic founder of Culture to Innovate and a Healthy Place to Work. She's a president of the World
Iberoamérica.
Economic
Bienvenida,
Forum
Michelle, por favor,
for
tu saludo.
Iberoamerica. Welcome, Michelle. Please, your
Muchísimas
greetings.
gracias. Saludo a todos los hoy día presentes. Muy entusiasmada de compartir y escuchar. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, Michelle, por estar aquí. Y quiero presentar a Arlene Solotkin. Quiero presentar a Arlene Solotkin en este momento, nuestra querida Arkin. Estoy escuchando a Mario en la traducción. Fundadora y CEO del
She's
Instituto de
a
Bienestar
founder and CEO
Integral en
of the
México
Integral Wellness
y
Institute in
presidenta de la
Mexico
Sociedad
and president of
Mexicana de
the
Psicología
Mexican
Positiva.
Society of
Bienvenida,
Positive
Arlene.
Psychology. Welcome, Arlene.
Muchas gracias, Betsy. Es un gusto estar
Thank you very
contigo y
much,
con
Betsy.
todos
It's a pleasure
compartiendo
being
esta
with you
mañana.
and sharing with everyone this morning.
Ok. Y ahora no escuché a Arlene si está hablando en inglés. Si me ayudan las compañeras de Backstage, pero voy a continuar.
I wasn't
Con
able
estas
to hear
tres
Arlene, so
invitados,
I'll continue.
y
Now,
este
with these three
servidor, este
guests
espacio da
and
servicio
myself,
a
we'll
desarrollar este
start
temario de hoy en dos momentos
to
típicos.
development of this
Primero,
topic for
con
today in
momento
two
de
monumental
exposiciones
times. The
y
first moment
propuestas
with
extraordinarias que nos trae
presentations
cada
and
invitado.
extraordinary proposals that
Justamente lo
each
que
of our guests
María
brings.
ya está preparada para
What
iniciar. El segundo
Maria
momento,
actually is already
quiero
prepared to
que
start. And the second moment,
Quiero
I want us
que
to
estén muy preparados. Vamos a tener un
be
foro
ready.
de
We're
una
going to have
conversación
the
rotativa de
forum of
preguntas con nuestros
a
invitados. Ahora sí,
conversation with
María, te
questions for our
invito a
guests.
este espacio
So
de
now, Maria, I invite you
exposición.
to this space for presentation.
Justamente,
Thank you so
traes un
much.
tema
And
extraordinario.
you bring us an
María,
extraordinary
bienvenida.
topic.
María
Maria,
va a hablar
welcome.
desde el ámbito y el
Maria
campo
will
de la
speak
psicología
from
positiva
the world of
de un
positive
tema muy
psychology,
interesante que
but a very
solamente
interesting topic that
María
only
podría tocarlo con
Maria could discuss
gran
with
soltura.
uh,
Eh,
in great depth.
el punto de vista, cómo evolucionar desde
The
el punto de
point
vista
of view
centrado
of
en la
how to evolve
persona
from the
a
point of
un
view
punto de vista centrado en las
person-centered
personas
to
y en los sistemas. Bienvenida, María.
a point of view focused on people and systems. Welcome, Maria.
Good morning. As an expert in the field of resilience, I have come to learn over time that we do better when we attend to our individual needs and be wise about the systems around us, both our impact on others, the system of others, and how our systems can support us. Cultural historian Thomas Berry said, "We are not ourselves without everything and everyone else." And we know from the data collected over decades now that the best decisions are made when they are made collectively. David Cooperrider from the field of appreciative inquiry has long said that the most efficient system change happens when we bring in the collective view at all levels in an organization. As an individual, our coachees are looking for strategies. And in light of what Betsy has outlined for us, also there is a great hunger and need for wellness. If we consider that all organisms, all biological organisms, actually participate in flourishing when there is a mutual exchange, then we benefit our coachees when we take the lens only thinking about themselves and expand the lens to think about themselves relative to the systems around us. Two examples. I was working with a gentleman in his 40s who was becoming the CEO of an international travel company. He was experiencing, understandably, anxiety, worried that he could handle it all. I asked him to think about a time in the past when he made a great leap forward, and it went well. Most specifically, I asked him about the success factors that supported him. He named many, but three of them I pulled out for him to pay attention to. That he takes time to reflect, that he listens to wise others both inside the industry and outside, and third, that he actually took time to be with his family. I then asked him to consider the following. If those strategies benefited you, How might they have benefited those around you? And it was an epiphany for him to realize that the things that support him most in his evolution as a leader were also tremendously beneficial to those around him, to the systems around him, both at home and at work, because they were the strategies that enabled him to have greater rest, less anxiety, and more courage. What's fascinating about courage is that it does necessitate an inner strength. And yet we are most courageous when when we know we are not alone, when we know we are connected in a system of support. I then asked him the following question. As you move into the CEO level, what are the choices that best support your evolution as a leader, but also bring most benefit to the systems around you? You see, we are capable of holding multiple strategies at the same time. A second example. I was working with an executive with a very successful consulting firm globally. Her husband had been diagnosed with a devastating disease, Parkinson's disease. And so she was balancing her profound need to be home and caring for her husband with this long and beautiful and deep and important career. Priority number one was self-care so that she could manage both. In this case, I asked her to look at systems from a different point of view, not just in terms of the systems that drained her, that made her work and living impossible, but rather what are the systems that support her in sustaining this balance? When we consider ourselves, as well as the groups and teams and systems around us from a positive psychology perspective, meaning is increased, optimism grows, and the opportunity to build in a radical, regular, consistent program of self-care becomes clear and evident. Because of this, then, our resilience and our endurance is strengthened. This wisdom has been available to us for centuries. The Buddha once said, "Nothing ever exists entirely alone. We must pay attention to who we are in connection to others." I look forward to exploring a little more later some uncomfortable questions about this notion of holding both lenses.
Muchísimas gracias, María. Importantísimo la introducción que nos
Thank you
estás
very much,
haciendo
Maria. Very important,
para
this
tratar este
introduction
tema
that
de
you're
hoy
giving
sobre un
us
nuevo
to
capital y
cover this pocket
autoconocimiento
for
humano,
today about
que
new
es más
capital and human
académico por
flourishing.
Ryder
You
en
mentioned
su
David Cooper-Ryder
investigación
in
y
his
justamente el abarcar
inquiry,
los
and
sistemas
that
de apoyo
covering those
hace que
support
los
systems
procesos
makes
sean
us
mucho más llevaderos,
have
que
processes be
tenga
more manageable and to
un
have
mejor
a
entendimiento y un mejor tratamiento
better
y creo que aquí
understanding
viene muy
and
bien el
managing
tema que
better.
Michelle nos va a
And I
traer
think this
y quiero
relates very well to
invitar
the topic that
Michelle ahora
Michelle
en
will
este
bring us.
espacio
And I want to
justamente
invite Michelle now to this
porque el
space
tema, Michelle,
because
en complemento
the
con lo que
topic,
María acaba de
Michelle,
compartirnos,
complementing what Maria
sobre
just shared with
florecimiento
us
humano como capital,
about
esa
human
propuesta que
flourishing
nos
as
haces, Michelle,
capital,
para
this proposal
redefinir
that you
la
provide us to
creación de
redefine
valor a través del
the creation of
bienestar,
value
la
through
pertenencia y la
well-being,
seguridad
that
psicológica,
belonging and
posicionándonos
psychological
a todos como los
safety,
nuevos impulsores del
positioning us all
crecimiento
as the
sostenible.
new
Te escuchamos,
um,
Michelle.
engines of
Muchas
a
gracias,
sustainable growth.
Betsy. Pues sí, mira, creo que
Thank
el
you very much,
tema del
Betsy.
florecimiento
And I
humano
think
es
that
un tema que
human
venimos
flourishing is a
explorando
topic that we've been
ya hace
exploring
muchos años en
for
las
many years now
organizaciones que han
in
tenido
the
un
organizations that
interés
have
claro
had
en entender
a
que el
clear
asset más
interest in
importante que
understanding
tenemos
that
es la persona.
the most important asset we
Ese ha
have is
sido
the
un camino
person.
largo.
This has
Yo
been a
llevo más
long
de 25
path. I've
años en
been
temas de
over 25
transformación,
years
renovación,
now in
evolución
topics
cultural
about
en las
transformation,
organizaciones
renovation, cultural
y
evolution
hemos
in
visto que hay siempre una
organizations.
lucha
And we've seen that there's
importante
always an
entre lo
important
que
struggle
significa
between
realmente
what it truly
un
means
lugar extraordinariamente bueno
to
para
have
trabajar
an extraordinarily good
versus la
place to work
productividad, ¿no? Y creo que
versus
es momento de
productivity.
cambiar
And I think
la
it's
idea
time to
obsoleta
change
que
the idea,
existe, ¿no?
this obsolete
De que el
idea that
bienestar
exists,
y el
that well-being and performance and a company are in tension. We have more data that this really is part of the same equation. Human flourishing is the base of innovation. When we are working around the cult of performance, people, the level of exhaustion, that very little time we have to learn, relearn, digest, it's what makes organizations, the organizations themselves, be strangling their possibilities. When people are in safe spaces where there's a system for care around those people, they're valued, they're inspired. Obviously, they have more spaces to think more creatively. They collaborate with more openness. They adapt a lot more or a lot easier to change. And these are the behaviors that push for competitiveness in an organization. In the current economy, we see very evident data of organizations that are able to achieve these versus those that don't. And these are very tangible data in terms of presence of people in an organization, the type of talent that they could attract and retain or remain within the company. And this means that they can fully develop, right? So clearly we have topics related to inclusivity, to trust, where we've lost a lot lately in trust, learning, purpose, and not only do they have happier collaborators, but they make of this an ecosystem that's wildly sustainable, which is also a very relevant topic towards the future of how these organizations can uh, remain competitive through time, because the true loss is not really in investing in people, because clearly having a culture of this type, it takes time to budget, investment to build that. But the true cost of this is to ignore the importance of all of this is not in the investment or the potential cost that we might want to have to create a place of this nature. And clearly, demotivation, burnout, and lack of sense come into play that they're much more costly than any other investment in well-being. Even that people want to be and want to give to an organization, because you currently and for a long time now, you cannot pay a collaborator to give you more. The collaborator wants to give you the best that they have, as long as he's in a place where he can flourish and be themselves and have an empathy facing the integration between his life and his personal life with work. The other thing that I would think it's the corporation argument that's really convincing is that most powerful thing is not necessarily a moral situation, that we know it's the best that can be done and it's necessary to do it for a world that we're needing to have, but it's in a strategic topic. I think that this human power that we have within the organizations are possibilities for progress. So this leads us to the topics that were already being discussed. Aside from a clear and solid reputation as an employer with high credibility, where people want to work there, but not only that, I would say that the consumers are wanting to nowadays consume more from brands that have high impact in the world. And this leads us to organizations that are prepared
que el
for
futuro
the
es ahora,
future,
¿no?
that the future
Estamos
is now,
siempre
right?
desde
We're
COVID, yo te
always,
diría,
since
viviendo
COVID, I would
tiempos de
say we're living
incertidumbre.
in times of
em,
uncertainty.
y creo que aquí el
And
tema
I
de
think that here,
poderse
the
reinventar, el
being able
tema
to
de
reinvent
poderse
yourself,
adaptar
being able to
y
adapt
pertenecer a algo
and
más que no es
belong to
solo un trabajo,
something more that is not
tiene
just a
muchísimo
job
que ver con este tipo
has a lot
de
to deal
culturas
with
alrededor del
this type
bienestar
of
y el desarrollo
cultures
humano,
around
no
well-being and
visto
human development,
necesariamente como filantropía,
not seen
pero esto
necessarily as
asegura
philanthropy, but
convertir
it is
en
ensuring
esto
and
una
uh,
fuente renovable de energía y
turning
crecimiento
in this
dentro
and
de una
renewable
organización.
source of energy
Así que
and
me
growth in
parece
an
que
organization. So I
el
think that
tema para mí gira
the topic for
alrededor
me, it revolves
de
around
convertir el talento
turning
humano en
the
realmente lo
human
más
talent
importante
into
que una organización
truly what's
tiene
most important that
y
an
hacerlo
organization have
accionable, porque
and make it
accionable y
actionable,
medible.
because
Seguimos viendo
actionable and measurable,
muchas
because we
organizaciones que
continue
dicen
seeing a lot of
entender esto,
organizations that say they
pero
understand
no se
this,
ve reflejado en la
but
voz de la
it's not
gente que
reflected
trabaja
in the
ahí.
voice of those that work
Tampoco se
there.
ve reflejado en los
And it is
indicadores
not
de
reflected
negocios de
either
las
in the business
organizaciones
indicators
como se
for the
podrían
organizations
ver. Está
as
completamente
it could be seen.
relacionado
It's
y tangible
entirely
y
related and
visible
tangible
el
intangibly
poder
visible,
embarcar un
being
camino de
able
este
to
tipo hacia el bien
take
de
on
la sociedad,
a
el
route
mundo, el
of
negocio,
this type
etcétera. Muchas gracias.
for business, society, and
Muchísimas gracias, Michelle,
people.
y me
Thank you
parece
very much.
interesantísimo lo que traes a la
Thank you
mesa
very much, Michelle.
también.
And I think it's very
Siguen
interesting what you
siendo
bring
el
to the
asset
table.
más
And,
importante de
the
los
doing
negocios, son
might
las
be the
personas, de la
most
sociedad
important
misma, son las
for
personas. Es
businesses is the
contradictorio
people in society in themselves.
esté
It's
siendo también
contradictory
poco
that it's being
accionable en
also
este momento y que
not that
busquen los
actionable right
mercados de
now,
escape y
and that we
enfocados
don't
hacia esto.
have
Y
truly
creo que esa
KPIs
tensión
focused
nace
towards
de una
this.
falta
I
de
think this
conocimiento, de
tension is
entendimiento,
born
como
from
tú
a
lo has
lack of knowledge,
mencionado
understanding, as you
impecablemente.
mentioned.
Y esa tensión también
Very
nace
clearly,
de por qué
this
no hacer
tension
esto
also
como
comes
una
from
ecuación
why not
trabajo
doing this one
con
same
florecimiento,
equation,
con productividad.
work
Y
with
creo que es
flourishing,
ese
with
cambio
productivity. I think it's this change
de
of
desarraigo hacia el capital tradicional de los
unrooting
sistemas
towards
económicos
traditional
que ha
capital
venido
of
en más
economic
de
systems,
200
has a
años de
name and last name, has over
existencia,
200 years of
hacia este
existing
nuevo
even,
capital que
towards
estamos
this new capital
abanderando y
that
que
we
estamos
are
trabajando hoy.
spearheading and working on.
Sin duda, tu tema
Undoubtedly, your topic
entrelaza muy bien con lo
is
que viene en la segunda
very
parte de las
well
preguntas,
related
pero
to
también se
what comes in the second
entrelaza
portion of the
muy
questions,
bien
but
con
it's
lo que va
also
a introducir Arlene en este
very much
momento
related to what
y que
someone will be
que
introducing
creo
to
que
us
no
right
podría
now,
ser
that
el
I
más
think
indicado haber
it,
puesto a
it couldn't
Arlene
be better to
en esta
have
parte
put
de
Arlene
este
in
primer
this final portion of
módulo,
this
porque
first
Arlene va a
module, because
hablarnos de la
Arlene will
esperanza,
talk to
del
us about
sentido de
the hope
urgencia,
of the sense of
del sentido,
urgency,
perdón, de importancia,
sorry,
que es
of
un
the sense of
término que quiero que le
importance.
ponga muchísima
This is a
atención a lo
topic
que va
that
a
I
hablar
want you
Arlene
to pay
sobre
a
el
lot of
sentido de
attention to what Arlene will talk
importancia.
about, that
Tiene
sense of
concepto
importance.
del mattering
It's
interesantísimo dentro de lo que estamos
a
hablando.
concept of
Y
mattering, very
Arlene viene a
important
hablarnos del capital oculto
around
del
what we're talking about.
florecimiento
And she
humano,
talks about
justamente,
the
más allá
hidden
del
capital of
rendimiento,
human
más allá de la
flourishing beyond
productividad,
performance, beyond
yace un
productivity.
poder silencioso
There's this
de la
silent
esperanza
power
y
of
ese
hope
sentido de importancia.
and that
Bienvenida,
sense of
Arlene.
importance. Welcome, Arlene.
Muchas gracias, Betsy. Pues sumando a lo que
Thank
todos
you very
han
much,
dicho
Betsy. And
y
adding to what everyone has
mencionando
mentioned and
nuevamente el costo de
mentioning
este
again
síndrome de la vida
the cost
ocupada,
of
nos
this
damos
syndrome
cuenta
of
que
busy life,
vivimos, por
we
un lado,
realize
una
that we
época de
live
gran avance
on
en
one
muchos
side a
sentidos y
times
por
of
otro
great
lado,
progress
en
in
un
many senses,
momento
and on the other hand,
donde
in
la salud
a
mental de
time
mucha
where
gente se
mental
está
health
viendo
of many
afectada, ¿no?
is
Medimos casi
being
todo en resultados,
impacted. We
productividad,
measure almost
desempeño,
everything in results,
pero
productivity,
al
and
centro de
performance,
las
but
necesidades humanas más
in the center of
básicas
human needs,
está
the most
el
basic
poder
ones we
tener
have,
esperanza
being able to have
sobre el
hope
futuro y también
about the
reconocer el
future,
sentido de
and also
contribución
recognizing
que
that
cada uno
sense
de
of
nosotros hace.
contribution that
Vivimos en
each one of us,
empresas
as
donde
thus we live
muchos de
in
los
companies where
colaboradores o de la
a
gente
lot
que
of the
participa
collaborators
se
or the
siente
people that
invisible.
participate
Por un lado,
feel
vivimos en una
invisible.
historia
On one
donde
side, we live a
tenemos una
story
capacidad de
where
impacto enorme y
we
esto
have
lo
an
vemos
enormous
reflejado
capacity for
en
impact, and we
incluso
see
las
this
redes
reflected
sociales.
in
Con un clic saben
even
qué es
in
lo que
social
estás
media with
comiendo y por
just
el
one
otro lado
click
la
they know
gente
what
se
you're
siente
eating, and on the other
invisible.
side people feel
Entonces
very invisible.
necesitamos
So we need to strengthen these two ideas, recognize, as Martin Seligman says, the father of positive psychology, that we are not only being pushed by the past, but being pulled by the future. And if we don't foresee a promising future, we don't see how we can grow within the organization. We don't see the skills that we could develop. We don't see what we are connected to, as Maria was mentioning. So we feel like an island where there's no belonging. And on the other hand, if what we do is not valued or well perceived, nor do we have that capacity of recognizing that what I do matters and what I do provides value. So I feel totally unrelated, and this need of being valued and feel that I contribute value truly, it's reflected in all of the indicators that talk about the importance of recognition, of the importance of um, putting a spotlight on those people that work on our teams individually, but also collectively. So hope reminds us that the future can change, but also this sense of contribution reminds us that our presence can transform that future. And this implies that people can feel active in change and development of their own work, but also of the work of their teams and the organization in general. Over the last years, to give some examples, Paradisi and other researchers have reviewed over 30 studies about the topic, and they've realized that the people that feel that they matter and that their work and their life contribute with value report much higher levels of well-being, of satisfaction, and vital energy, which obviously translate into productivity and a lot of these predictors of success that companies consider. And this sense of contribution is even stronger than having high self-esteem. Actually, in many models of well-being, we talk about the importance of interpersonal relations, and currently we're analyzing one of the most important factors beyond the relation is how do you feel that you impact the lives of other people. So it's not enough feeling competent, as Gordon Flett says. People need to feel important. And when this sensation disappears, we have antimatter incoming, which is that painful belief of saying that no one will notice my absence if I disappear. And this is something very deep. On the other hand, when we talk about hope, we need on one side to recognize that we have the will and the motivation to act, and this is something intrinsic, but organizations can also favor a lot with their work spaces where people feel motivated to take action, to be autonomous within the capacities that they can develop in the organization. Autonomy is vital, and also being able to develop different paths to attain that which they're proposing for themselves. If we go back to mental health, we recognize that depression is sadness without hope, and hope is considered the number one factor or the number one cause for suicide. And when are strengthened, there's more resiliency, like Michelle mentioned, more creativity, more mental health. And this is very much related with burnout that the World Health Organization recognizes now as a global issue. And it's truly that one of the causes, the most important causes of burnout is feeling that what we do doesn't matter, that we're not seen, that we're not recognized. We sabotage ourselves due to that deficit of perceived value. So one important strategy, a psychological and psychological one, is being able to shed a
que
light on
somos
people and
importantes. Y
recognize that
esto para
we're
el coaching
important.
es muy
And this
importante
for coaching is very
porque son
important
palancas de
because
transformación.
these
Cuando
are
ayudamos como
levers
coaches
for
a la gente a
transformation. When
reconocer
we help as
cuál es ese
coaches, people to
futuro, cómo lo
recognize
pueden
what
hacer
is that
posible, cuáles
future,
son
how they can
esas
make it possible,
capacidades que tienen
what are
para
those
transformar no solo
capacities that
su
they have
rol,
to
sino
transform
la
not only their
organización y
role,
el mundo en el que
but the
viven.
organization
Y
and
por
the
el
world that
otro
they live
lado,
in.
también
And on
cuando
the other
podemos
hand, also,
nosotros
when
ayudar
we
a que
are able to
reconozcan
help
cómo ellos hacen una
for
diferencia en el mundo que nos rodea.
recognition of
Y
how
un
they make a
ejemplo ya
difference
para
in the
cerrar
world
es
around us. And one
Better Up,
example, just to
una
close, is
empresa de
Better Up,
coaching y desarrollo humano que se basa mucho
a
en
coaching and
principios de
human development
psicología
company that's based
positiva y
on
que han visto que
positive
cuando las
psychology,
personas
and that
encuentran
they've seen when
significado en su
people
trabajo,
found
muestran
meaning
mayor
in their
compromiso,
work,
menos
they show
rotación, mejor
greater commitment,
desempeño,
less
pero además necesitan
turnaround, and better
entender
performance, but
por qué
also they need
importa
to
lo que
understand
hago y cómo su
why it
contribución
matters what I do and
realmente
how their
aportan
contribution truly,
a la organización
how they
y a
truly
un
contribute to the
bienestar
organization
multidimensional.
and to an authentic
Y bueno,
well-being.
hay mucho más que decir,
Well,
pero por el
there's a whole lot
momento.
more
Sin
to say,
duda,
but for the time being,
sin duda, querida, sin duda, y escucharte de manera
undoubtedly,
tan
undoubtedly, and
sobre todo el
really,
tema, Arlene,
it's
que
a
has
luxury,
traído,
particularly this topic
el
that you brought,
concepto del mattering y
Arlene,
el
this concept
antimattering.
of mattering
Me
and
toca el corazón
anti-mattering.
escuchar justamente
It,
cómo en nuestras
it
sesiones de
hurts my
coaching,
heart to
y tú
hear
lo has
how in our
mencionado
coaching sessions,
inevitablemente,
and you
vienen a
mentioned
estas
it,
sesiones
they come to these
considerando
sessions
esa creencia de que
considering
no están aportando
this
nada de
belief
valor,
that they're
que
not
son
contributing
realmente
any value
explotados,
and that they're
usando ya
truly
las palabras que
being
usábamos
exploited
en tiempos
using
de
the
la
words that we
esclavitud.
used in
Pero
times of
también
slavery.
mucho de eso
But
está
also, a
basado
lot of
en
that is
esa
based
libertad
on
miope que
this
creemos que estamos ejerciendo cuando en
um,
verdad somos esclavos
blind
nosotros
hope
mismos
that
de
we're
una propia
seeing
agenda,
when we are
de una
truly
propia
slaves of
desenfreno
our
de
agenda
vida, confundiendo tal vez
or
lo que es la verdadera productividad, una productividad
freedom of
más
life,
consciente
confusing
de
what
lo que yo he venido
productivity
hablando
really is, a
justamente en los
more
últimos años, ¿no?
conscious
Has hablado de
um,
cómo
productivity that
definitivamente
we've been hearing about over the past years.
el
You've
burnout se
talked
está
about how
convirtiendo en un problema global.
burnout
La
is
salud es
becoming
parte de
a
una de las
global
enfermedades mentales
problem, is part of the one of
que
the
están teniendo
mental health
un
issues that are
índice
having
a la alza, ¿no?
an
Y
indicator
cómo
that's
cambiar ese
increasing,
déficit,
and how to
cómo
change that
cambiar
deficit, how
esa
to change
tensión que
that
está jalando hacia ese
tension
lado.
that's
Yo creo que
pulling
aquí es donde los coaches entran a hacer
towards that. I
verdaderas
think that's where
conexiones,
coaches
verdaderas
truly become
conversaciones
and
significativas
do
en
real
nuestros
connections,
procesos,
real meaningful
verdadera
conversations in our
humanidad.
processes,
Y bien nos
real
recuerda
humanity.
María,
And
nos
you
enfatizó
remind
desde el
us of what
inicio la
Maria
importancia de los
emphasized from the
sistemas.
beginning, the importance of
Y si tenemos
systems.
memoria, la historia de la
And if
humanidad ha
we
hecho
have memory,
cambios
the story of humanity
impresionantes
has
en
made
favor de la humanidad
impressive
cuando
changes in
hemos hecho
favor of
esto
humanity
en
when we've
colectivo.
done this as a
Los grandes
collective.
cambios, por ejemplo, solo por
Those
mencionar
greater
algo, hacia la
changes,
mujer
just to
ha
mention
sido
something
cuando
for
hemos
women,
hecho algo en
have
colectivo.
been when we've done
La vida
something
es parte del
collectively.
pasado, es parte
Slavery
de
in
lo que no.
itself of
Entonces
past
creo
times is
que
another
ese
example. So I
llamado
think that this
a
calling to
integrar los sistemas de apoyo
integrate
ayuda
the support
bastante a
system
hacer una
truly
transformación
helps
drástica a lo que estamos
to do
viviendo.
a drastic
Así
transformation
es
of
que
what
creo
we're
que
living
esta
through.
primera
So
parte ha
I think that
sido
this
un
first
buen
portion
abrebocas
has been
para todos
a good
nosotros, los coaches, la
amuse-bouche
comunidad
for
de
all of
coaches y
us coaches in
profesionales que
the
estamos
community of
convocados
coaches and
hoy y
professionals
que
that
nos
are
verán más
called
tarde por
today,
nuestros canales de
those
YouTube.
that will see us later
Y
on
lo que
through our
ustedes han
YouTube
traído a la
channels.
mesa nos
And what
pone
you
en
have
la
brought to the table
perspectiva
puts us into
de
perspective of
considerar que sí podemos desde el coaching ser ese
considering that we can from
catalizador
coaching be
vital,
that
como bien lo mencionaba
vital
Arlene.
catalyzer, as
Pasemos
Arlene
ahora a
was
una
mentioning.
parte lindísima,
Let's move
la
on now
parte
to
de
a
los
very
foros
beautiful
abiertos con las
portion of
preguntas
open
más
forums with
interesantes para
the most
cada una
interesting
de
questions
nuestras
for each of
panelistas.
our
Y yo
panelists.
quiero invitar en esta primera
And I
parte,
want to
vamos a ir
invite
de
in this first
preguntas
stage, we're going to
más
go from
ligeras a preguntas
lighter
más
questions
profundas,
to
quizás
more
conversaciones
deep
más
questions, perhaps
incómodas que
to
nos
more
permita salir de
uncomfortable
aquí
questions that allow us
movilizados
to come here
y
mobilized and
comprometidos a una
committed
acción. Quiero
towards
invitar a Michelle
action.
en este
I want
momento,
to invite
por
Michelle
favor.
right now, please,
Michelle, creo que
because
abrir
Michelle, I
contigo
think that
nos va a dar
opening with you will
un
give us
focal
a good
hacia para
focal
dónde
point
vamos
to where we're going towards. And this is an audience that's predominantly of coaches. So how can we truly, Michelle, highlight this or frame this new capital that we're talking about, human flourishing, not seen as a cost where organizations generally and social systems see it that way? You mentioned it a while ago, but as the main propellant of this economical growth that you talked about and this innovation that we're needing in our society. What is this argument, Michelle, of business that coaches can have really to react with what we know it's necessary?
Muchas gracias, Betsy. Sí,
Thank you very
definitivamente
much, Betsy. And
creo
yeah,
que no
truly,
solamente
I
los
would say that
coaches, ¿verdad?
not only
Yo creo
coaches,
que
I
obviamente los
think that
coaches tienen un
obviously
rol,
coaches have
yo te
a
diría,
role, I would say,
sumamente crítico hoy para
very
poder
critical
fomentar, apoyar
to support
y tener iniciativas en
and
una
have
organización
initiatives
donde la gente
in an
puede
organization where people
explayarse,
can,
puede tener un
uh, you
acompañamiento.
know, expand
Creo que
themselves
por
and have
ahí
a
mencionaba
accompaniment. And
María
I think
sobre,
that
no, perdón,
Maria,
mencionaba Arlene sobre el tema, por
sorry,
ejemplo,
Arlen
de
was
Better Up,
mentioning about
que
a
son
Better Up
justamente
that
herramientas
are
que dan una escalabilidad a la
tools that
oportunidad de
give
que todo mundo
scalability to
pueda
the
accesar
opportunity for
coaching.
everyone
Porque el
to access
coaching,
coaching,
desde
because
lo que
coaching,
yo interpreto hoy
from what
día
I
en la
interpret
relación que
currently
llevo con
in the
organizaciones,
relationship that I have with
sigue siendo
organizations,
accesible solo para
continues being
algunos.
accessible just for
Y
some.
creo que esto aquí hay un
And I
tema
believe that this year we have
definitivamente de
something,
oportunidad, porque es una
definitely an
herramienta
opportunity,
que hemos
because
visto que
it's
da
a tool
obviamente
that we've
un
seen
soporte
that
y un apoyo continuo en
gives
situaciones complejas. Como
continual
hablaba yo
support in
hace un
complex
momento,
situations. As I was mentioning a while ago,
los seres humanos y las personas que
human
trabajan en una
beings and
organización
people that work in an
tienen una
organization
vida. O sea, no es que
have
la
a
vida
life.
se queda fuera del
I mean, it's not
trabajo.
that life is
Entonces, la parte de
outside of work.
integración y
So
el
that
entendimiento
integration,
de la
that
persona que tienes
understanding
enfrente
of the person that
es
you have in
súper
front of you
importante. Creo que hoy
is
día
super
uno de
important.
los
I think that
temas
currently one of
más
the
relevantes que un líder puede
most
tener
relevant topics
es
that
el
a
tema de la
leader could have
escucha
is
y las necesidades que las
listening
personas
and
tienen.
the needs
Y
that
creo que el factor
people
del
have. And I
coaching
think that
juega un
the
rol importante
coaching
aquí
factor has an
como
important
un,
role here as
yo te
a,
diría, brazo habilitador
I would say, enabling
para
arm
poder potenciar
to be able
o
to
desatorar
empower or
o generar
free
posibilidades
up
y
or
este
generate
apoyo a las
this
personas, ¿no?
possibilities
El
and
costo
support
de
to people.
oportunidad
The cost
más
of opportunity
devastador que seguimos
that's more
viendo
devastating
en
that we continue
organizaciones
seeing
que siguen
in
aferrados
organizations
al
that
culto del
continue
desempeño
clinging on to this
es
cult of
que
performance
definitivamente están
is that
estamos
definitively
drenando
they
la
are, and we
fuente
are,
misma del
draining
progreso.
the source itself
Es
of
evidente
progress.
que entre
It's
más
evident that the
agotas una
more
fuente de
you
energía,
exhaust
pues
a
menos
source of
energía
energy,
tendrá,
the
vitalidad
less energy
para
you'll
poder
have, less
seguir.
vitality to
Entonces,
be
todos
able
estos
to
temas que van
continue. So
relacionados
all
a
of
un
these topics that are
supuesto
related
costo,
to a
llámese
supposed
invertir en
cost,
bienestar o en
be it
coaching,
investing in well-being or coaching,
no es el costo final.
is
El
not
costo
the
es
final
no
cost.
hacerlo,
The
¿no?
cost is not doing it,
Porque
right?
las culturas
Because
siguen estando construidas
cultures
alrededor de
continue being
sistemas que
built
premian el
around
agotamiento,
systems that reward
más que la
exhaustion
imaginación, más que
more
la
than
creatividad, más
imagination,
que
more than
la
creativity,
forma
more
de
than the way
resolver
of resolving
problemáticas dentro
the
de una
issues
organización, ¿no? Y
within
lo
an
seguimos
organization.
llamando
And we
productividad.
continue calling
Y
it
eso no es
productivity.
productividad. La
That's not
productividad,
productivity. Productivity,
más que nada, esto se llama
more than
desgaste,
anything, this is called
¿no?
burnout or
Entonces,
exhaustion.
mientras sigamos
So
creyendo
while we
o
continue
sigamos
believing
reconociendo y
or
premiando
continue
en
recognizing and
organizaciones,
rewarding
y esto
in
lo digo
organizations, and
de la
this
fuente
I
de
say it
liderazgo, la gente que tiene
from the
gente a
source of
cargo,
leadership, that
porque
people that have people
la
to
organización no son
reporting
las
to them,
paredes, ¿no? O
because
sea,
the organization
seguimos
is not the
teniendo
walls. I mean, we
líderes que
continue
están
having
premiando
leaders
el
that
tema
are
de la
rewarding
productividad, si es que trabajas
productivity
más de X
if
horas al
you
día,
work
¿no?
more than X
Y pues
hours a
cada día
day,
que
right?
glorificamos esto,
So every day we
la prisa,
glorify
el
this,
cansancio,
the
pues
hurry,
el
that
costo de perder
exhaustion,
las ideas
or the cost of
podrían
losing the
inclusive
ideas that
redefinir
could even
industrias.
redefine industries,
resolver grandes retos,
resolve
el
great
tema de las
challenges,
conexiones humanas
human
que
connection
podrían realmente
that could really
apoyar en renovar o evolucionar
support in renewing or
comunidades, ¿no?
evolving communities.
Y finalmente yo creo
And
que el
finally,
mundo no
I
es que
think
carezca de
the
talento,
human world
lo que carece es de
is not that it
entornos
lacks talent.
donde ese talento
What it
pueda
lacks is
florecer,
environments where this
respirar,
talent can
crear,
flourish, breathe,
pertenecer.
create,
em,
belong.
y justamente aquí
And
es donde hay
here's
este
where
gap
we have this
o esta brecha
gap
de
of
si no te estás agotando o te
if you're
estás
not
muriendo en la raya del
exhausting
cansancio y
yourself
del
or
burnout,
dying
no eres
on that
productivo y
finish
por
line
ende
of
no encontramos
tiredness and burnout,
talento
you're not
en el
productive,
mercado.
and therefore we
Y
don't
eso
find
no
talent
es
on the market,
una
and that's not
realidad, ¿no?
a
Porque hay
reality, right?
casos reales,
Because
hay
there's real
organizaciones
cases,
reales
there's
que
organizations,
sí
real
están
organizations
logrando
that are
generar estos
being
entornos. Hay
able
que
to generate
voltear
these
hacia allá,
environments. We
pero
have
yo
to
diría que lo
turn towards
primero
that.
es creer en
But
ese
I think that the
liderazgo.
first thing would be believing in it.
No estamos
There's no,
encontrando un
we're
liderazgo
not
que realmente
finding
crea
a
que
leadership
la
that truly
productividad viene desde el bienestar.
believes that productivity
Entonces,
comes from well-being.
la
So
próxima frontera del
the next
crecimiento no vendrá de empujarnos a la
frontier of
gente,
knowledge will not come
sino
from
de
pushing people more,
permitirles
but from
florecer
allowing them to
y yo
flourish.
diría
And I would say
contar plenamente
uh,
con la riqueza humana que
to
una organización tiene,
really count
porque
on
ahí
that
es donde
human
está la
richness
riqueza, ya
that
está dentro de la
an
organización.
organization has, because that's where the richness is. They're
Porque
within the
esa riqueza
organization.
humana no
Because
es
that
un
human
costo
richness is not
administrarlo, al
a cost
contrario,
to
es el
administer.
motor más
On the
poderoso
contrary, it's the
de
most
innovación y de
powerful
renovación
engine of
económica que
innovation
tenemos, porque
and
ahí es donde
economic
tenemos que
renewal that we
cambiar
have.
el
And that's where
shift de mindset.
I think we need to
Gracias.
shift our mindset.
Gracias a ti, no puedo coincidir más
Thank you. I couldn't agree
contigo.
more
Definitivamente, el
with
verdadero
you.
costo está
Definitely,
en no
the true
hacerlo, como
cost
bien lo has
is in not
señalado,
doing it,
¿no?
as you
Y
have
creo que hay una
very well
miopía
pointed out.
ahí en
I
la
think we're
productividad que
blinded
tiene un origen que data
towards
repito, más de
productivity, and it
200
has
años que viene
an
de un
origin that has
sistema
been happening for
y
over
me
200
conviene,
years that
empiezo aquí a introducir
comes
un
from a
poco de
system that's
pensamientos provocadores. Conviene, es
in
muy
in
conveniente
it's
sentir
convenient.
que si hacemos
It's
más, si
convenient to feel
entregamos
that if we
más, eso
do
lo
more and we give
24/7,
more and we're
si estamos
24/7, if
usualmente
we're
desaforados con
absolutely,
agendas fulles,
with
alcanzando
a
más,
full
más, más,
agenda,
más.
reaching
Esto
more
es
and
muy
more and more,
conveniente para los
this is very
sistemas
convenient for
tradicionales, ¿no?
the
Y aquí
traditional
viene la
systems, right?
introducción de la
And here
propuesta
we
que hemos
have the
traído hoy, el
introduction of
nuevo
the proposal
capital,
that we
¿no?
brought today, the new
Eh,
capital.
lo
Um,
cierto, al
the
escucharte,
truth
es
is
que
when
recordaba que entre
hearing you
más
is that
queremos
I
hacer
remembered
más,
that the more
más, llenar
we
más,
want to do
alcanzar
more and more
más,
and feel more, achieve
para,
more,
para parecer
to
exitosos, para
seem
vernos productivos,
successful, to appear
terminamos con
productive,
menos,
we end up
menos
having
salud,
less health,
menos relaciones,
less relations,
menos bienestar,
less
menos
well-being,
oportunidades e incluso menos
less
tiempo.
opportunities,
Y
and
esto
even less time.
es
And
el verdadero
this
costo que estamos
is the true
perdiendo
cost
en
that
esta
we are
sociedad
of what
cansada,
we're
como
losing
decía
in
el
this
filósofo
tired
Han
society, as
en un maravilloso libro
Han,
que
the philosopher,
recomiendo,
said
La
in this
sociedad
wonderful
del
book that I
cansancio.
recommend, The
Y
Society
nos
of
has puesto
Tiredness.
justamente la
And
cabeza a
you put
explotar
us,
con tus comentarios.
you've have our heads exploding with your comments.
Creo que sí estamos drenando el
I
progreso.
believe that we are
Creo que
draining
hemos sido
progress. I
ambivalentes.
think we have
Por un
been
lado,
indifferent.
mencionamos que vamos hacia ese progreso.
On
Y
one
por otro
side,
lado,
we
realmente
mentioned that we're
estamos
moving towards this
ahorcando y
progress, and on
drenando
the other hand,
ese
we're really,
progreso.
uh,
Y la base, Michelle, es
you
tan
know,
sencilla.
draining that progress. And the
Incluso
basis is
es
so
tan
simple,
accesible, aunque
even
no es física
so
cuántica.
accessible.
Sin
It's not
embargo,
quantum physics,
pareciera
but
ser que
really,
todavía la tensión
it
que yo
would seem that
mencionaba está
this
en la
tension that
búsqueda
I
y la
was
compra.
mentioning is still in
Y
that
no sé qué te parece a
struggle.
ti, pero creo
And
que
I don't know
podría
what
ser
you
que
think about it, but I think
deberíamos
it could
de
be that
saber que es una
perhaps
realidad
we should know
fáctica,
that
una
it's
aceptación
a
radical de que esa
factual
tensión
reality,
estará, porque yo no
that
puedo
this
cambiar el
tension will
sistema,
be there, because
pero
I
sí puedo
cannot change the
equilibrar la
system,
tensión.
but I
¿Te
can
hacemos
balance
a eso?
that tension. To that resound with you?
Sí, yo creo que más
Yes,
que
I believe
equilibrarla,
that
Betsy, yo te
more than
diría
balancing it,
que
Betsy, I would say
integremos los
that
conceptos,
we
porque
integrate
uno
the
va de la mano
concepts,
del otro.
because one
podemos
goes hand in
pensar
hand
en
with the other,
mundos
so we cannot think about
paralelos de esto.
parallel
Necesitan
worlds
unidos
of this.
para
They
que
have to be
realmente esto avance,
united
porque
so
mientras
this
sigamos
truly
pensando que la
progresses, because
productividad
as long
no
as
va
we
de la
think that
mano
productivity
de un
doesn't go
bienestar,
hand in hand with a
que
well-being,
además la palabra
that
bienestar es amplia.
also
O
the
sea,
word
aquí
well-being is
hablamos de
pretty
bienestar
ample.
en salud. Yo
So we
diría
talk
que
about
la
well-being in
más
health. I would say that
importante, como también compartía Len en los temas, es la salud mental.
the most important one,
Es como
as
la base
was being
de
shared,
todo
is
esto,
mental
pero
health,
la
is
salud
like the
mental
base
se
of all of
construye
this, but
también de
mental
muchas
health
cosas que
is
tenemos que
built of
entender.
many things that we need to understand
Entonces,
also.
si no integramos ambos
So
temas
if we
para el
don't
progreso,
integrate both topics for
creo que
progress,
difícilmente veremos los
I
avances
think that we will hardly
que queremos ver.
see
Y las
the progress
organizaciones
that
que
we
no
want
lo
to see,
entienden a
and
un
the
nivel
organization that
estratégico,
doesn't
que creo que aquí
understand this
también es
strategically.
un tema porque
And
nos
I think
siguen
that this
dejando
is also a
muy en
topic
manos
that we
de
need
que
to
recursos
see, because
humanos
they leave
hagan
in the
mejores
hands of human
organizaciones. Es que
resources
recursos
to
humanos no es el que
create better
habilita
organizations, but
o
human
deshabilita una cultura,
resources is not the ones that enable
porque
or
finalmente para
disables
mí son
a culture,
entornos que
because in the
tienen
end,
que
for
ver
me,
con la
it's
cultura. Por
environments
eso
that
las
have to deal
formas de
with culture,
trabajo es lo que
because
premiamos, es lo
these
que
are the ways of
reconocemos,
working,
son los
is what we
valores que hay en una
reward, what we
organización,
recognize, it's
Las
the values in an
conductas.
las
organization,
conductas, los
behaviors.
comportamientos.
Yeah,
Esto
behaviors
todo lo
and
dicta una estrategia, porque finalmente la
this is
cultura
all
tiene que ver
dictated
todo
by
con el
strategy,
negocio,
because in the end, the
¿no?
culture has to deal with
Pero si
business,
seguimos creyendo que
right?
HR es el que va a hacer
But
el
if we
programa
continue
para
believing
que
that HR
la
is the one
clase de
that's going
yoga
to do the
funcione y
program
ahí
for the yoga
solucionemos la
class
salud
to work,
mental,
and
pues
we
no hay
resolve
prevención
mental
en el
health,
tema, no
there's
hay
really no
educación en el
prevention in the
tema,
topic, there's
no
no
hay
education about the
soporte
topic,
a las personas
there's no
para
support for
mejorar.
people to
Entonces, yo
improve.
te diría
So
que
I would say that
definitivamente integrar la
definitively
estrategia de bienestar,
integrating the well-being
empezando por
strategy,
entenderla bien,
starting with understanding it
que
well,
es finalmente la base de la
and that in the
productividad.
end it's the base
Y
of
ahí es donde creo que
productivity.
hay un
And that's where I think
entendimiento
we have
muy, yo te diría, diferenciado
a
de
very
líder a líder, ¿no?
differentiated
Seguimos
understanding from
creyendo
leader
que
to
la
leader.
productividad viene por
We
medir y
continue believing
trabajar
that
más y
productivity
KPIs que
is
no
done
van
through
en torno a
measuring
esto,
and
cuando
working
no, no
more
es
in
así.
KPIs that don't revolve around this, when
Entonces,
that's not
las
the
empresas
case.
que sobrevivirán,
So the
las
companies that
empresas que
will
tendrán el
survive,
mejor talento,
the companies
las
that will
empresas que
have the
tendrán
better
menos puestos
talent
en
or
rotación,
have less
etcétera,
costs
etcétera, serán
due
las que
to
están
turnaround,
realmente
etc., will be the
integrando
ones
esto
that
a
are truly
nivel
integrating this
estratégico, ¿no? Y
at
vuelvo a lo
a
mismo,
strategic
Absolutamente.
level. And going
medir
back to
y
the same
medir.
thing,
No podemos
measuring, and
hablar de que
measuring. We
somos,
cannot
queremos ser una
talk
empresa
about
y no
us
estar
being and wanting to
haciendo
be
todo lo que
a
estamos
company and not being
midiendo y
consistent with what we're
accionando, ¿no?
measuring
Ahora
Y
hay un
accionando.
sinfín
and actioning.
de herramientas
And
que se
there's a
pueden
whole array
usar, o
of
sea,
tools
no
now
hay
that can be used. I
excusas
mean,
realmente,
there's no
Betsy, para
excuse,
ir en
truly, Betsy, to
En esta
move in that
dirección.
sense, in
Indudablemente,
that
creo
direction.
que
Undoubtedly,
gracias
I think
por
that, thank you,
profundizar un
Michelle.
poco
Thank
más
you
sobre esto.
for going a
Incluso
little bit
creo que
deeper into this.
encontraste una mejor
I even
palabra, la
think you found
integración.
a better word
Y
with integration.
esta es como el
This
camino que
is
puede
like
permitir a que esta
the path
tensión
that can
pueda
allow us
ser
for
mejor
this
llevada, que
tension
no
to
puede ser
be
eliminada,
better managed,
pero sí
because it
que debe
cannot
ser
be
mejorada.
eliminated,
Quiero invitar
because
ahora a
but
María.
it can and should be
Y creo
managed.
que
I want
Michelle
to
ha
invite
puesto
Maria
un
now,
poco
and I think that Michelle has
candente la
put a
conversación
little bit
en la
this
raya, María.
of
Y quiero
spice
hablar
on this
contigo
conversation on the line. Maria and I want
proponerte
to
la
speak
siguiente
with you and
pregunta.
propose the following
¿Estarás de
question.
acuerdo conmigo en que habitamos, María,
Would
ahora en
you
un
agree with
mundo
me
que nos
that we
grita
inhabit
que
a
seamos
world
más
that
resilientes y
shouts
que
to
eso
us to be more
significa a
resilient?
veces aguanta,
What that means
aguanta
sometimes
todo lo
just
que puedas?
take on
Y me
everything that you can
preguntaba si
and
los
just
coaches podemos
resist.
empezar
And I was
realmente a
wondering
construir
if we
real este
coaches can
nuevo capital
truly
que venimos
contribute
hablando
to
este
creating
día.
this new capital that we've been
¿Cómo
talking about
pasamos,
today.
María, de
How do we
simplemente
move, Maria,
sobrevivir
from
al rendimiento
just
a
surviving
proponer,
performance
a
to
prosperar más bien
proposing, to
a
prospering
través de
actually
él? ¿Cómo
through
pasamos
it?
de ese
How do we
sobrevivir
move from this
a prosperar
survival
a
to
través del
prospering
rendimiento?
to through
¿Qué
performance?
sabiduría
What
esencial
essential
debemos
wisdom
inculcar a nuestros
should
clientes,
we
a nuestras
uh,
familias, para que vean el
provide to our
bienestar
clients,
no
to our
como un
families, so that
descanso
they
del
see
trabajo,
well-being not
sino
at
como la
resting from
fuente
work,
del trabajo?
but as the source of work?
Betsy, you gave us some very powerful, disturbing statistics at the beginning. And I want to layer in two other pieces of data to set a global context.
Go on.
levels of suicidality, this is according to the World Health Organization, for 18 to 29-year-olds. It is now the third leading cause of death globally. These may not be our employees or our colleagues, but they are our nieces and nephews, our sons and daughters, the children of our neighbors, our best friends. Secondly, according to a global think tank, the Institute for Economics and Peace, the primary conditions necessary for conflict are higher than they have ever been around the world since World War II. So there are tremendous large pressures on our organizations that have nothing to do with work, but that are affecting our ability to feel safe, healthy, productive, energized, and vital in the world. I'd like to take, Michelle's encouragement to have a sense of integration of the personal life, the well-being life, and the performance life, and Arlene's notion of the importance of mattering and hope in order to sustain ourselves. And one of the ways I hold this all with a coachee is to ask them the following question. Have you worked for someone or next to someone who did not take care of themselves, who didn't care at all about their well-being, who ignored how exhausted they were, how angry they were, how frustrated they were, who ignored what it meant to be a human being? And everyone says yes, we've all worked near someone like that. And then I ask them, what is the impact on you and your colleagues? And they list it out. And then I ask them, have you worked for a leader who actually had that sense of integration and balance, who cared about the well-being of themselves and others, as well as performance? And they'll say, yes, I've seen it, or I've been near it, or yes, my supervisor. And then I ask them to write down the impact for them. And then I ask them to look at those two columns and choose, what impact do you want to have? No one ever chooses the negative impact. But it is striking to notice how contorted we become when we work with people and in systems that do not prioritize health and well-being. And whether you're a rising leader, a brand new employee, or a C-suite executive, you have impact on those around you. It makes a tremendous difference if you enter the workplace with a sense of vitality, a sense of mattering to oneself, as well as that others matter to you, a sense of grounded resilience based in a grounded optimism, that there are things we can do to move the needle forward in terms of performance while not sacrificing the self. Hitandro Wadhwa from Colombia calls this working from inside out, not just outside in. And over again, it is shown that teams that integrate this perspective of a dual reality, that the person matters as well as the performance, have teams that are more highly engaged, cooperative and collaborative, higher job satisfaction, and deeper, longer resilience. We can endure healthfully, more importantly, in ways that do not destroy us when we have a collective around us where well-being is elevated. And just to summarize a point you were asking about resilience, we misunderstand. Resilience is not about survival, getting through. It's about our capacity to adapt with fluidity and flexibility to the stressors and opportunities at hand. And that flexible, fluid adaptation is best made possible when we have that integrated dual perspective.
Gracias, María, por traer
Thank you,
también
Maria, for
una
bringing
mirada
also
donde
this
quizás muchos de
perspective
las
of
comunidades que están
where
hoy aquí
perhaps
de
a lot of the
coaches
communities that are
no
here
tienen
today,
intervenciones
coaches
directas
don't have
a nivel de
a direct
negocio,
intervention
sino
in
más en
terms
los
of
negocios.
business, They have it more in business, but they have families. And even more so, I would dare say, Maria, that we as coaches have situations at this point, this particular point that we're here, you and everyone that's gathered here, we have situations, storms that we're going through, and that have nothing to do with work. However, the person that's going to work, the person that's going to coaching, it's that human being that has that situation, that human situation that they have. So this puts us in a commitment. Even you made me think that as coaches, it puts us in a even deeper commitment of looking more into this condition of health and this condition of well-being. To commit suicide, you don't necessarily have to slit your wrist. We have this situation where we're dead in life. We're going to our work, even just in presence, just our bodies, but the mind, our emotion, our spirit is not going to work. And that's one of the indicators that's also undermining organizations more. You reminded me also, Maria, of Elizabeth Huber, the anthropologist that studied for many years the terminal death and was fascinated with the topic to the point that she practiced for 5 minutes a death to get to know that transition. And in her research, Maria, she was saying actually that the thing that people were the most regretful of in their terminal phases, there was a common denominating pattern, and it was not having enjoyed life more. In their deathbed, most patients that she interviewed, and she interviewed nurses that accompanied patients in their last days, and their phrase was not enjoying life more. This reminds me of the recent award received by philosopher Han that I mentioned in the Society of Tiredness. He received this month or last month the Princess of Asturias award, and in his he was saying more nap, more party, more naps is what we need. More naps means setting pauses, significant pauses, the power of not doing, and more party. He was meaning to what you have invited us to think collectively about the systems that come together to support. And in that sense, I want to ask you, Maria, when we go to the organizations, even when we want to practice it in our life, more party and more napping, as a metaphor, we resist because you can't, because there's no time for more party or more napping. What is it that truly we are not hearing our inner master, our internal wisdom, Maria? What has to happen that is not something that we could regret to be able to discern what should be different in our lives?
We have to appreciate, and we are very bad at this, we have to appreciate that we have one life in this form. The number one regret, as you said, of the dying is that they did not prioritize relationships and happiness. They prioritized work. And third, we have to begin to understand that our worth in the world is not tied to the trophy or to the title, but to who we are as human beings with each other. I love it when a young person in an organization at the end of the year does their self-evaluation and they say to their supervisor or their director, these are the strengths and gifts I have brought to this organization. and they name out loud their capacity to take care of themselves so that they could show up for the work challenges in a healthy mindset. When a young person, a mid-level career person, and or a leader names out loud the value of that integration of I matter to myself and work matters. My well-being matters and the impact on my colleagues matter. When they actually name that out loud, we have the chance from inside and as well as coaches from outside influencing the culture of the organization. But we first really have to understand that there is no other life. There's no other second chance. What we create in our days is what we create in our lives.
Hola, ¿sí me escucha?
Can you hear me now?
Sí.
I can hear you now.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, María. Gracias, María. Gracias por
Thank you, Maria.
devolverme
Thank you for
la pregunta con esa reflexión que parece tan
giving me
básica,
back
María,
that
parece
the
tan
question with
simple.
that reflection. It seems so
Y creo que es que
basic.
lo
It
esencial y
might
lo
seem so
básico
simple,
es
and
lo
I
que a
think that
veces nos
what's
cuesta más
essential and
trabajo de
basic is
discernirlo.
what we
Gracias, María. Y
have
yo quiero invitar
more
ahora a
difficulty
Arlene
discerning.
a
And
que
thank you, Maria. So
nos
I
guíe
want
en
to
este
invite
momento
Arlene now to
justamente
talk to
para
us
cerrar
about
esta parte. ¿Cómo
just to
evitamos,
close this
Arlene, que
section.
todo esto
How
se
do we
quede
avoid,
solo en
Arlene,
el individuo?
for all of this to
¿Puede,
just stay in the
cómo
individual?
puede un coach, por
How
ejemplo, ser un
could a
agente de
coach, for
cambio
example,
para que
be
toda
a
una
change agent
organización
for
adopte el
an
bienestar
organization
integral, no
adopts
como una app
integral
de
well-being,
medición que
not
está
as a
de tentación
measuring app
porque está
that
de
or a
moda,
meditation app, sorry,
sino como un
that's
sistema
in fad right now,
operativo
but as an
integral?
operational system that's integrated,
Bueno,
holistic.
primero,
Well, first,
creo que
I
es
think that
importante seguir, o sea,
it's
me hizo
important
María
to
reflexionar en esto de
Maria
no
made me
hay otra
reflect on
vida
this. There's
y también hay una
no
creencia
second
de que
life,
alguien más nos va a venir a
and also I
salvar
believe that someone else will
y
come to
nosotros
save
nos
us,
salvamos a nosotros mismos.
and
Por
we
eso
save
mencionaba
ourselves. That's
tanto la
why I was
importancia de esta
mentioning
palabra
the importance
autonomía,
of this
porque
word
la autonomía
autonomy,
es el
because
poder
autonomy
dirigirnos
is
y
being
poder
able to
pensar
direct
por
ourselves
nosotros
and being
mismos y
able to
poder
think on
encontrar
our own
formas de
and to
accionar,
find
pero
ways of
también la
actioning.
autonomía
But
tiene que ver
also,
con
autonomy
asumir
has to
nuestro
deal with
poder y
assuming our power
reconocer
and
nuestro propio dolor
recognizing
del que tú hablabas
our
hace un
own
momento.
pain that
Perdón
you
que me
talked about
fui
a minute ago.
hasta, o
So
sea,
that
a
I
la conversación anterior, pero se
went
me
back to
hace
the prior
de verdad
conversation, but
sumamente importante
it
y esto
seems
también
really important,
nos
and this
ayuda porque
also
tenemos una
helps us
crisis de
because
liderazgo y los
we
líderes
have a
están
leadership
enfrentando
crisis, and
las
leaders
mismas
are
situaciones
facing
que está
the same
enfrentando el
situations
resto de
that
la gente
the rest of
y
people are
necesitamos
facing.
reconocer nuestra
And we
humanidad
need to
compartida.
recognize our shared
Esto nos
humanity.
ayuda a evitar que todo se quede
This helps us
en el
avoid that
ámbito
everything
individual,
just
porque
remains in that
necesitamos
individual
entender
realm, because we need
cómo
to
este
understand that
impacto es
how
al
this
final un
impact
impacto también
is in the end
sistémico.
an impact that's
Entonces,
systemic also.
reconocer que lo que yo estoy
So
viviendo,
recognizing that what
también
I'm
como
going
colaborador,
through,
sin
and also
importar el
as
nivel que
a
tengas en la
collaborator, no matter
organización,
the level that you have in the organization,
lo más personal es lo más
the
común. O
most
sea, lo
personal
que yo estoy
is the most
viviendo,
common. So
sin
what
importar el
I'm
lugar en
leaving,
el que estoy
no
dentro de la
matter the
organización,
place where I'm at in the
probablemente es
organization,
muy similar a lo que están
probably
viviendo
is very
muchas
similar
otras
to what
personas
many
en
other
la
people are living
organización.
in the
Entonces, el
organization.
poder hacer esta
So being
conciencia
able to
es algo muy
create
importante.
this
Por otro
awareness
lado
is something
está
very
el
important.
tema cuando
On the
hablamos
other hand, we have when we
de
talk
la
about
contribución para que pase
the
de algo
contribution,
personal a esta parte
so you can
sistémica,
move
es
from
entender
something personal to
cuál es
something
mi
systemic, is
contribución
understanding what is
en
my
la cadena de
contribution
valor. Hace
in
varios
that
años
value chain.
trabajé justamente un proceso
Several
así
years
con una
ago, I worked on
organización
a process like
y
this
venía gente
with
de
an organization,
diferentes áreas
and we
y
had
cuando
people
ellos
from different
vieron
areas
cómo
coming,
lo que
and when
ellos
they saw
hacían impactaba en
how
cada
what they
una de
did
las personas
impacted each of
de
the
la cadena de
people
valor,
in the
desde la
value chain,
recepcionista
from the
hasta el que está
receptionist
trabajando
to
en la planta
the
hasta
one
que
that's
nacen las
working on
centellas,
the
hasta que
plant,
se transportista, hasta
to
el
the delivery
nutriente,
person,
se dieron
the
cuenta que
carrier, the
son un
client.
sistema
They
vivo.
realized that
Y fue
they're a
muy
living
interesante
system,
ver
and it was very interesting
cómo
to see
todos somos
how
parte de esto mismo y
all of us
cómo
are
cada
part of
uno
this, and how
de los
each one
elementos o de las
of
barreras
the
o
elements
de
or the
los
barriers or
errores, pero también cada
the
uno de los
errors, but also
aciertos
each
y
of
la
the
fortaleza de cada uno de los
times
colaboradores
that
tiene
you
un impacto
hit the
importante, ¿no?
nail on the head, and that
Entonces,
that contribution of collaborators has
han
an
habido
important
estudios, por ejemplo, que
impact.
Adam Grant
So there's
ha
been studies,
compartido
for
y se
example,
ve
that
que
Adam Grant
cuando
has shared, where we
a
see that
cierto
when
grupo de personas les
to a certain group of
enseñas
people,
cuál es el
you
impacto
teach
de
them
su trabajo en
what's
el
the
mundo,
impact
allá
of
afuera,
their
no solo dentro de la
work in the world
organización,
out there, not only
cómo este
inside the
impacto
organization, how
hace que,
this
que el
impact
resultado de su
makes
trabajo
the result
sea
of their work
completamente
to be
distinto. Por ejemplo,
totally different. For
gente que
example,
duplicó la cantidad de
people
fondos
that doubled the
recaudados
number of
una vez que
funds gathered
conoció a los
once
beneficiarios de
they
esos fondos,
met
¿no?
the beneficiaries
De
of
esos
those
fondos de
funds,
donativos, en lugar de
of
nada más estar
donations,
pidiendo
instead of
dinero por
just
teléfono en
asking
un
for
call
money
center.
over the phone in a call
Entonces,
center.
esto nos ayuda mucho a
So
pasar de lo
this really
personal
helps
a
us
lo
to move from
colectivo.
what's personal
Y sé
to
que
collective.
mencionaste esta idea
And I
también
know you mentioned this
de
idea
cómo
also of how
pasar más allá de que las
to
prácticas de
go
bienestar se
beyond,
conviertan
the
en
well-being
una
practices
app de meditación
becoming
o algo
an
así
app
como
for
muy
meditation or something similar,
superficial.
very
Y es que
superficial.
necesitamos
And
como
it's
coaches actuar con una
we need as
intención
coaches to act
estratégica y
with
Michelle
a
lo mencionó
strategic
una y
intention,
otra
and Michelle
vez.
mentioned it over and
Necesitamos
over.
mostrar la evidencia, es decir,
We need to
sentarnos a
show
mostrar
evidence.
que
We need to
todas estas
show that
prácticas tienen
all of
profundidad.
these practices have depth.
Desgraciadamente, como coaches
Unfortunately,
o como
as
gente que
coaches
hace
or as
capacitaciones
people that
organizacionales,
does
nos damos
organizational
cuenta
training,
que muchas
we
empresas
realize
nos
that
contactan
a
porque
lot of
quieren un
companies contact us
espectáculo,
because they
porque
want a
quieren dar
show,
una imagen
because they want
de
to
bienestar
give
y a veces
an
creemos
image
que el
of
cambio de cultura
well-being. And sometimes we think
viene
that the
de hacer un
switch
cambio
in
de
culture
cultura
comes from
absoluto
doing that
y es muy
absolute
importante
change or switch in culture.
reconocer
And
que a
it's very
veces
important to recognize
una
that
buena
sometimes
práctica que está
one
bien
good
alineada
practice that's
con el propio
well
liderazgo,
aligned
porque si el
with the
liderazgo
leadership
no
themselves,
lo asume,
because if leadership
entonces
doesn't
la práctica
assume
no se
this,
sostiene y
then
se
the
vuelve
practice
nada
is
más
not
superficial.
sustainable and
Entonces
it just becomes
necesitamos
show.
de
So
verdad
we need
reconocer cuál es el
truly to
punto de
recognize
inflexión,
what
cuál
is
sería
that
esa
inflection point,
práctica mínima
what would be
viable
that
que
minimal
logra
viable
cambiar el
practice
paradigma de la organización
that is able
y
to
poder
change the paradigm of
sostenernos
the
a través del
organization and
tiempo.
be able to sustain
Si
it
los
through
líderes no
time.
están a bordo, es
If
muy
leaders
difícil
are not
que
on
esto se
board,
pueda
it's very
sostener al
difficult for
tiempo.
this to be
Y
sustainable
ahí
through
entra
time.
mucho la ética de nosotros
And
también
there
como
is where
líderes,
our
de
ethic
no
as
querer
leaders
vender lo
comes
que se
in,
ve bonito, sino
of not
vender
wanting
lo
to
que
sell what looks
verdaderamente
nice, but selling what
importa. O sea,
truly
prácticas bien
matters,
diseñadas,
meaning
sostenidas
well-designed
en el
practices
tiempo,
and
alineadas con
sustained
los valores
through
de la
time, aligned
organización
with
y
the
con la
values of the
convicción
organization
de
and with
los
the conviction
líderes.
of
Eh,
leaders.
eh, bueno, ya sabemos la
Um,
falta de engagement
we
que
already
hay,
know that
ya
lack of
sabemos
engagement we
que
have. We
más del
know
41% de la
that
gente
over
habla de que
41% of
sintió
people
mucho
speak
estrés
about
el día
feeling a
anterior.
lot of
Esto
stress the
tiene
prior day.
billones de dólares
This
al año
has
en
billions of
pérdidas, o
dollars
sea,
of
equiparables
losses per
al
year.
Producto Interno
They're,
Bruto
they're
a nivel
similar to
mundial.
the
Entonces,
GDP,
el rol
the
del coach
world's
es
GDP.
clave
So
de
the
poder
role
ayudar
of the
para que
coach
las
is key, of
prácticas de
being able to
bienestar
help
sean
for
auténticas,
well-being
sostenibles,
practices to be authentic,
medibles. Como dijo
sustainable,
Michelle,
measurable.
no hay
As Michelle
ninguna
mentioned,
excusa para no
there's
medir.
no excuse not to
Necesitamos
measure.
mostrar el impacto de lo que
We need to show
implementamos
that impact of what we're
y
implementing,
necesitamos de verdad
and we need to
como
truly
hacerlo muy tangible y
do it very
nuevamente
tangible.
regresar
And
a
again,
la
go back
humildad
to
que tenemos como
that
líderes, porque
humility
como
that we
líderes
have as
en
leaders,
las
because as
organizaciones,
leaders
estos líderes
in
saben
organizations,
lo que a
these
ellos en lo
leaders
personal
know
les
what
cuesta
they
vivir una vida
personally are
según está
having a hard time
equilibrada
with,
o que
living a
no está
life
bien
that's not
integrada.
balanced or that's not well integrated.
Es
y
muy
esto es algo que
cierto.
tenemos que transmitir.
And that's something we need to transmit.
Absolutamente, Arlene, es muy cierto.
Absolutely,
Eso
Erlyn.
como lo has
This is
puesto como
very
la
true. And I
práctica
like how
mínimo
you
viable, como
said
cuando
it,
hacemos el
like that
producto
minimum
mínimo
viable
viable
practice,
que
like
puede
when we do the minimum
funcionar, la
viable
llamamos la
product that could
práctica
work.
mínima viable.
You've
Y
called
yo
it
creo
the
que esto que
minimal
estás
viable
invitándonos
practice.
a
And I
hacer
think that this
es
that you're
el
inviting us to
buen
do is
punto
the
que puede cambiar. Yo le
point
llamo el
that
punto de
could
pivote
allow,
que
I
cambia la
think,
dirección de
I
la
call it
bola
the
totalmente, ¿no?
that
Los
pivot
organismos
point
son
where it
organismos
changes the
activos,
direction of
dinámicos,
the ball.
para que
The
sean vivos y
organizations
dinámicos
are
están sustentados
uh,
por la base
organisms
sólida
are alive and
que es la
dynamic.
fibra humana,
They're
¿no?
sustained by
Creo
the
que
most
me
alive
agradaría
fiber,
introducir aquí
which
una
is
pregunta para
human.
ti,
I would
ya
like
en
to
las
introduce here
preguntas
a
más
question for you,
profundas, Arlene,
in the
ya
deeper
que
questions, Arlene.
estás tocando
Now
este
that
tema.
you're touching on
¿Cuál es
this
la
point,
principal barrera
what is the
cultural en
main
la sociedad que impide
cultural
realmente
barrier
que el
in
bienestar
society that
integral se convierta
prevents
en una
integral
realidad?
well-being to become a reality?
No, no somos
Um,
plenamente
we're not
productivos cuando
entirely
tenemos estos
productive or
problemas de
fully
salud,
productive when we
de
have these
estrés y de
issues
agotamiento que venimos hablando.
with health,
No es
stress, and
cierto que
exhaustion that
somos
we're
más
talking
exitosos ni
about.
más
It's not
ni
true that
estamos
we're
más
more
orientados al progreso.
successful or
¿Cuál
we're
es
more oriented to progress.
digámosle, esa principal
What is
barrera
that
que tú observas en las
main barrier that
organizaciones?
you see in organizations?
Pues pienso que la barrera cultural
Well, I
más
think that
existente es
the
la
more
creencia, a
percentage
veces
cultural barrier is that
explícita, a
belief,
veces
sometimes
inconsciente, de que
explicit, sometimes
valemos solamente por
unconscious, that
nuestro
we are
rendimiento. Y
worth it,
esto
worth
convierte
only
de alguna
our
forma
performance,
el
and this,
bienestar en algo
in a way,
decorativo en
turns
lugar de
well-being
verlo
in
como un
something
activo
decorative
estratégico.
instead
Y
of
para
a
romper esta
strategic
barrera,
asset.
el coach
And to break this
debe de
barrier, the
activar
coach
una palanca
has
muy
to
concreta
activate
que es de
a very
verdad la
specific lever
evidencia,
that is
porque hoy hay
truly the
datos muy
evidence, because
contundentes.
today we
Me
have very
gustaría mencionar
um,
algunos.
resounding
Jean
facts.
Manuel
And I would
Deneuve,
like to
junto
mention
con
some.
varios
Jean-Manuel
colegas,
Deneuve,
han
along with
analizado datos
several
de más
colleagues,
de
have analyzed data
1.8
from
millones
over
de empleados
1.8
en
million
82
of
mil unidades de
employees
negocio,
in
en
81,000
donde
business
se han
units,
dado
where
cuenta que los equipos
they
con mayor
realized that
bienestar son
the teams with more
consistentemente más
well-being
productivos,
are
tienen
consistently
mejor
more
servicio
productive.
al cliente y
They
mejor
have better
rotación.
customer service and
Y un estudio posterior
less
de Deneuve,
turnaround, and a
en donde
study
encuestó
done
a
afterwards from
mil,
Deneuve, where he surveyed
empleados de
1,000
1,762
employees
empresas
from
que
780,
cotizan en la bolsa. Este
1,782
es el estudio
companies
más contundente que
that
hay
are
a
part of the
nivel
stock market. And this is
organizacional
the most
y mostró que
specific study at an organization level.
las
It showed
empresas
that
con altos niveles de
the
bienestar
organizations with higher
tienen
levels of
mayor
well-being
valor en el mercado
have greater
accionario.
value in the market, in
McKinsey
the stock
ha
market.
comprobado también organizaciones
McKinsey
con
has
alta
proved
salud
also, or
tienen
tested
alta
organizations with
salud
high health,
organizacional,
high organizational
tienen
health.
3 veces más de
They
retorno.
have 3 times more
Entonces,
return.
o sea,
So
si nosotros como
this,
coaches
if
podemos
we as
mostrar
coaches
tangiblemente
can
que el
show
bienestar no es hacer lo correcto, sino una
that
estrategia
well-being
de
is not
crecimiento
doing
y
the right thing, but a
sostenibilidad, creo que
growth
eso es
and sustainability
muy, muy
strategy, I think that
importante
this
asumir
is very, very
nosotros como
important,
coaches que
assuming
nuestro rol
ourselves
no
as
solo es
coaches that our
inspirar,
role is
sino
not
también
only to
ayudar a
inspire,
medir y a
but also
traducir
to
lo que
help measure
medimos
and
en algo
translate what we
concreto.
measure in something
Em,
specific.
poder,
Excelente.
poder
Being
también
able
documentar
to
cómo invertir en
also
bienestar
document how
mejora
to invest in
todos los
well-being improves
indicadores, ¿no? De
all
retención,
of the
clima,
indicators of
compromiso y reconocer que cuando
retention,
cambia la
climate,
narrativa,
commitment,
pues cambia la
and
cultura.
recognizing when the narrative changes, the culture
Gracias,
changes.
Arlene, porque creo que
Thank you,
la
Arlene,
comunidad de
because I
coaches ha
think that
quedado más que
our
claro
community of
que
coaches
activar esa
is
palanca
now
es
very
con
clear.
evidencias. Lo ha repetido
Activating that
Arlene, lo ha
lever is
repetido
with evidence.
Michelle.
Arlene
Y
repeated it, Michelle repeated
justamente,
it.
gracias Arlene
And
por este espacio, quisiera
thank you,
invitar
Arlene,
a
for this
Michelle
space.
luego
Now
de
I would
ti,
like to invite
porque
Michelle
Michelle
after
nos ha
you,
hablado del
because
costo
Michelle has
de oportunidad
talked to us about the
devastador
cost
que
of
tenemos.
opportunity
Y el
that's
costo
more
de no
devastating that
hacerlo,
we
decía
have, and the
Michelle.
cost is not doing it,
Y
said
el
Michelle.
costo no es el programa de
And the
bienestar, el
cost is
costo es
not
dejar
the
de hacer
well-being
cosas
program. The
para
cost is stop doing
para no
things for
aferrarnos a este
this,
culto del rendimiento.
or not to
¿Qué
cling on to
innovación,
this
Michelle?
cult
¿Qué
of
mercados,
performance.
qué
What
progreso
innovation,
estamos
Michelle? What markets, what
perdiendo
progress
por
are we
seguir
losing on?
agotando a
Losing
este
out on
talento en las
with
empresas?
burning out this talent in companies?
Bueno, es una excelente pregunta. Yo creo,
Well, it's an excellent
Betsy,
question.
definitivamente que
I think,
aquí
Betsy, definitely that here
estamos un poco
we
cegados
are a little
de
bit
esas
blinded
oportunidades
of
que
these
se están
opportunities
perdiendo.
that are being lost.
simplemente por el hecho de
And
vivir en un
that's just because
entorno
of the
que
fact
no
that we live
reconoce
in an environment that doesn't
lo que
recognize
podría existir,
what
un poco lo
could
que decía Arlene ahora,
exist. A
si
little bit of
cambiamos
what
la
Arlen
narrativa
was
o
mentioning, if
las
we
creencias
change the narrative
alrededor de
and the
esto.
beliefs around
Entonces, el
this.
primer punto para mí
So the
es que
first point for me
no lo ven,
is that uh,
no es algo
they
que
don't see it.
está
It's
en
not
el radar
something
de decir
that
qué
is in the
tanto
radar
mejor
of saying
podríamos ser
how much better
si
we could
esto,
be if
este tipo de
this
cultura existiera
this type
en la
of culture
organización.
existed in the
Hay
organization.
mucho,
There's a lot
yo
of
te diría, ritmo,
I would
agilidad,
say
poco
rhythm,
momento para
agility,
reflexionar
a little time to
sobre
reflect
mejores
on
resultados a través
better results
de la
through
gente, cuando la gente está
people when people are
empoderada en un entorno
empowered in an
altamente saludable,
environment that's
¿no?
highly healthy.
Entonces, el primer punto es
So the first point
cómo
is
hacernos estas
now
preguntas,
to ask ourselves these
finalmente
questions.
relacionando estos puntos de
In the end,
negocio
relating these
con la
business
cultura que
points
una organización
with the
necesita
culture that
tener
an
para llegar
organization
a
needs
esos
to have to get to
objetivos de
those
negocio. El
business
segundo
objectives.
punto
The
definitivamente
second
es
point
que las
definitively
nuevas
is that
generaciones, yo te
the
diría,
new generations, I would say,
mencioné
and I
anteriormente
mentioned
brevemente el tema
previously,
de los
briefly,
consumidores, ¿no?
the consumers.
Cuando también, por ejemplo,
When,
no hemos hablado
for example, we haven't talked about
en este
in
foro
this
todavía sobre el tema de género,
forum
pero
about gender,
sí
but
estamos viendo, por ejemplo,
we
que
are seeing, for example, that
hay unos indicadores realmente
there's some
atroces
indicators that are truly atrocious
en los retrocesos que estamos
in the
teniendo con
setbacks
la
that we're
perspectiva de
having
género
with the
y
gender
por lo
perspective,
menos
and
en el
at
mundo
least
de México,
in the world
probablemente
of
también
Mexico, which is
Latinoamérica, donde
probably
más
Latin America as
indicadores
well,
tengo en
where
relación a
more
eso,
indicators I have
es
in relation to that
que las mujeres tienen
is that
aún un
women
mayor
have
grado de
still a larger degree of
castigo, te diría, o
punishment, I
práctica
would say, or handicap
por no estar en una
for
organización que
not
está
being in an
ayudando con una
organization that
infraestructura en el
is
tema de
helping with
cuidados,
an
¿no?
infrastructure in
Más
care.
mujeres saliéndose de la fuerza
More
laboral.
women leaving the
Y
workplace,
finalmente las mujeres son,
and
saco
in the
esto
end, women
a colación
are,
porque las mujeres
and I
son las
mention
que
this
toman
because
también
women
las
are the ones that
decisiones en gran parte del
make the
consumo.
decisions to a greater
Entonces, si
extent
no
of
estamos
consumption. So
alineados en una
if we're
organización
not
de lo que
aligned in an
queremos hacer
organization of
con
what we
nuestros
want to do
clientes,
with our clients,
proyectar a los clientes,
projecting the
proyectar en los
clients,
productos que
projecting
tenemos,
in the
no
products
hay
that we
manera
have,
que creo que tú puedas
there's no way that I think that you
conquistar
could
nuevos mercados
conquer
o permanecer
new
en
markets
ciertos
or
mercados
remain
si tu
in certain
organización
markets
no está
if your
alineada
organization is
a
not
esos temas,
aligned
¿no?
to those topics.
Entonces, lo que no se vive
So
y lo que
what
no
is
proyectas desde
not
adentro,
lived and what
creo que
you
hay
don't project inwards,
una profunda
I think there's
problemática
a deep
de lo que
issues
ven de ti desde afuera, ¿no?
with what
Por eso
people
creo
see
que
of you
la
from
ecuación
outside.
de
So
un
that's why I
employer
think that the
branding sigue
equation
siendo súper
of
válida,
employer branding is still super valid.
de no que todos sabemos que las
We all know that
organizaciones quieren ser
organizations
lo mejor
want
que hacen,
to
de
be
lo que
the
hacen,
best that they do,
pero el
the best
cómo
at
lo
what they
hacen,
do, but the how
el por
they do it,
qué lo hacen,
the
es un
why they
tema
do it
eh,
is
sumamente, te diría,
something
crítico
that's
en la
very
transparencia
critical, I
que
would
las
say, in the
organizaciones tienen que
transparency
tener,
that organizations
no
need to have,
solamente a los consumidores,
not
hacia
only
las
for
comunidades,
consumers,
hacia las
towards
familias de los que
communities,
trabajan en la
towards families of
organización.
those that work in the
Es
organization.
todo un ecosistema,
This
¿no?
is a whole ecosystem.
Yo creo, Michelle, para ir
Absolutely.
avanzando
I
con
think,
un poquito
Michelle,
lo que ya
and
nos
to
queda,
continue
tú
with
nos has
the little time
puesto
that we
una
have left,
gran,
you had
mm,
uh, given
un
us
gran,
a
una gran bomba, una
uh,
gran bomba
a
en la
bombshell,
cabeza
really,
cuando mencionas esto que acabas
really a bomb
de
on our
relatarnos,
heads
nuestra
when
ceguera.
you mentioned
Esto
this
daría para
blindness.
muchos foros más de discusión y en
This
eso estamos los que estamos aquí
would
convocados seguramente.
serve us in many
Pero
discussion forums,
esta
and that's what we're
ceguera hay
doing here.
que hacer una
Those that
lucha
came to
contra
this call. But this blindness, we need to fight against a system that we're adapted to, you know. And my question is, why don't they see it? Part of it is education that we've talked about, and a lot of us here are working a lot on, but there's also pressure, social pressure that's misunderstood, and this with education could be changing. Now, I'm sure that coaches could start asking more uncomfortable questions, and not only that, inspiration of accompanying to understand the others, but to provoke them also evoke something in them. I think it's the time in history to do those type of questions. Thank you, Michelle. I would like to invite Maria now to close the space and perhaps close in very few minutes that we have. If you talk about being uncomfortable, dear Maria, and I know that you're not uncomfortable in making uncomfortable. What is the most uncomfortable truth that we should face about our own complicity in this cult of performance? What do we need to unlearn, Maria, radically, to be true custodians of this new capital?
I think we need to unlearn a belief that an individual cannot have a large impact. And the question I would like to leave everyone attending here with is, how wise are you willing to become? Wisdom requires perspective, which is what Michelle has offered us. It requires data, information, research, which is what Arlene has offered us. And it requires a path forward, which I've tried to do by giving you specific questions and tools, techniques that you could use with any individual consultant conversation or coaching conversation. It is remarkable the impact a shift we can have if we model our own wisdom about this path of integration while becoming wiser and braver about our own magnificence. We can be magnificent in standing steady with every single person we work with and every team we work with and saying, absolutely, performance matters. Absolutely, culture matters. And the health of the individual and the team matters as well. And I will stand here and hold all three with you.
Gracias. Gracias, querida María. Gracias por
Thank you.
introducir la
Thank you, dear
sabiduría,
Maria. Thank you for
la sabiduría como un
bringing
concepto realmente más allá de
wisdom
un concepto,
as a concept,
como
truly
una
beyond the concept,
capacidad que tenemos
as a
interna como
capacity
seres
that we have, an
humanos
internal
y que
capacity of human
deberíamos
being,
de explorar y
um,
visitar
and
mucho
that we should
más.
explore
¿Qué tan
and visit a
dispuestos
lot
estamos
more.
los
How
coaches
willing we
de
are, we
exponenciar,
coaches are
de
to
potenciar esa
really
sabiduría?
empower
Qué
and,
conversación
and
más profunda, y quiero
give
invitar a
potential to
todas
that wisdom.
las
And
tres
what a deep
queridas
conversation. I
panelistas,
want to invite
qué
all of our three
conversación
dear
más profunda y
panelists.
necesaria creo
What a
yo que
very
hoy
deep and
hemos tenido
necessary
junto a María,
conversation I
junto a
believe we've
Michelle y
had
junto
today
a
with
Arlene.
Maria,
Hoy
with Michelle, and
partimos
Arlene.
temprano
Today
al inicio
we
de una
started
tensión que
earlier
todos
at the
estamos
beginning from a
experimentando, el
tension
culto
that
al
we're all
rendimiento
experimenting of this call to
de la
performance,
vida ocupada
of
hacia una
the
urgente
busy life,
necesidad de
to
fomentar
an
un
urgent
nuevo
need of
capital en nuestra
fostering a
sociedad.
new capital
Vivimos
in our society.
glorificando
We
el
live
rendimiento, el
glorifying
estar ocupados.
performance,
Hemos
being
normalizado
busy.
la era
We
del
have
burnout.
normalized the
Estamos
era of
agotados,
burnout.
ansiosos,
We're
desconectados,
exhausted,
persiguiendo un
anxious,
éxito
disconnected, pursuing
desenfrenadamente.
a
Y el nuevo
success
capital es el florecimiento humano que
relentlessly.
nos
And new capital
permite,
is human
en este
flourishing
día de
that
hoy,
allows us
hablando del coaching,
today, talking about
deconstruir ese
coaching,
viejo culto,
building this
construir
old
una
cult,
nueva era de bienestar
building a
sostenible,
new area
una
of
verdadera
sustainable
misión que
well-being,
creo que
and
los
a true
coaches
mission
podamos
that I
tener,
believe that
es ser
coaches we could
verdaderos
have,
custodios
is
de ese
this
nuevo
being
capital
of
del
true
que hoy
custodians
María,
of this new
Michelle y
capital
Arlene
that
nos han venido a
Maria, Michelle,
conversar.
and Arlen have come to
Gracias,
talk to us
gracias
today.
a todos ustedes,
Thank you.
gracias a nuestras
Thank
queridas
you all.
panelistas por su
Thank you, our
tiempo,
dear
por su
panelists,
entrega
for your
cariñosa.
time, for your
Invitamos a abrir sus cámaras en este
careful
momento para que todos podamos vernos y
presentations. We want to invite you to
saludarnos,
open your
viendo
cameras so we
rostros
can all look at each
humanos y
other and say
no
hi, seeing
cámaras apagadas
human
porque
faces
fría
and
la
not
virtualidad.
cameras turned on, which virtuality is already cold enough. We'll done for today. We'll wait for you for tomorrow with Quo Vadis Coaching, where we'll give the presidency awards, where the committees will be doing their delivering accounts for the entire year on all the 2026 planning for all of our community of coaches. Blessings. Thank you to our interpreters that made great work, and particularly thank you for being here today, attentive and willing to hear about this topic that we've brought with a lot of love today. Thank you. And we'll just take a picture.
The International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.